So, welcome back to Happiness Highway. And I want to invite everybody to come and watch and listen to our episode. Today we're going to be talking about your happy place. And I want everybody living in their happy place all the time, as much as possible, right? But here's the key. You have to know what your happy place is so you can get there. What do you think, Melissa? What's your happy place?
My happy place is with my kids and my grandkids. I love that. I love doing that. And I also have in the back of my mind, I envision like being on a beach in Costa Rica. That's my ultimate, that's where I'm heading this year, maybe for Christmas or something. So that's another happy place, but ultimately with family. That makes me very happy.
So here's what I found. That everybody's happy place is a little bit different, but that there's certain fundamental parts to a happy place that involves everybody. So everybody has these same ingredients. They just have different takes on it. And so the first one that I wanted to talk about is contentment. And so we all live in a world and we all have contentment. It's an interesting term. Some people describe it as peace. Some people call it contentment. That's the word I use. And really what it is a balance between the good things in your life and the bad things in your life. And it forms this kind of baseline line. And that line can go up and down over time, but most people have a sort of certain level of contentment that they live their life in. So some people are very contented with their life, other people not contented at all. And one of the things that I found out about contentment was it's very much based on your perceptions. So some people can be living in a really poor neighborhood, and yet they're contented with the things they have. And other people can be living in like a rich neighborhood, or you're in a wonderful college, and yet they're not contented at all. And so contentment has a lot to do with your perceptions of how things are going. But the bottom line is we all have this one level of contentment, and that's kind of where we stay. But every once in a while, our contentment will change because something pleasurable will happen. So you graduate from school, you win an award, right? You get your book published, yay, right? But by definition, that pleasurable event is short-lived. So there's a blip in the line, so your contentment is kind of going on a line. But then it goes up when you have this pleasurable event. You're like, yeah, I feel really happy today. Excuse me. But then it recedes back. So, you win an award and you get your book published, but then it goes back to like, okay, I'm back to my level of contentment. And so pleasures are great. We all need to have pleasure in our life, but they're short-lived. So you can't live on just pleasure alone, but that's part of our happy place. Here's the next one, which is actually a fascinating thing. I had to add this later. It's anticipation of pleasure. And you're like, wait, what does that mean? So it's like, what you just said, like you think you're going to Costa Rica and sitting on the beach, right? So every time you think that, look at that big smile that comes on your face, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right. But you haven't gone there yet. So how long? Well, it could be 6 months before you get there. Mm-hmm. So you have 6 months of anticipating this pleasurable event. Mm-hmm. And in your mind, in your anticipation, everything's going to go great. The flight's going to be there. Your luggage is going to show up. The beach is going to be wonderful. The food's going to be amazing. The flight back will be great. So in your anticipation, you get the same amount of pleasure that you get from actually going to Costa Rica for a week. But the anticipation can go on for 6 months. Mm-hmm. The vacation's only going to last a week. So actually anticipation of pleasure is actually a more important part to us than actually the pleasurable event itself.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about, let's break those three down for a second, because we're talking about contentment, right? Let's backtrack just for a second, because I know we have a few more to go through. But in that contentment phase, don't you think, according to where you are in your life, you have different levels of contentment? So when you're younger, you're content with certain things. When you get older, like to my age, I realize I'm not content with certain things. And it's not until I change those things, then I realize, how was I ever content with living that way or doing something like that? Or people that are in dysfunctional households or dysfunctional marriages, or have someone that's addicted, or any kind of situation where everything that seems normal, right? That's the norm. That's your level of contentment. That's what you're used to. And then all of a sudden you see something outside of there and you think to yourself, hey, I don't like what's going on back there anymore. I need to switch it so I can be content with something better. And then that's where it comes in to your other key points, right?
But I think what you're talking about is that's the perceptual changes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the environment hasn't changed. It's your
Mm-hmm.
perception of the environment that's changed. So when you were 18, you didn't care if you slept in your car. When you're 67, you're like, yeah, not thinking sleeping in a car is a good idea anymore, right? But that has to do more with perceptions than it does with the actual environment itself. And that's my point. So you can change your level of contentment just by changing your perception.
That's
And one of
awesome.
those, and we'll talk about this later, is gratitude. That's one of the things that will actually change your perception. So one of the things that I find is somebody can be in a pretty poor environment, but their perceptions are that they're content. They have a certain amount of contentment because they have gratitude and they feel fulfilled. And so even though the environment itself might not be very appealing, they can be contented in there.
And you're talking about pleasure too. I think that there's a lot of times, like as parents, right? We put everyone else's needs in front of ourselves. I can only speak for being a mom because I'm a mom and a grandma, but I'm always thinking about everybody else. And at the age that I am now, and I'll age myself 57, I'm starting to realize I need to put some of my needs first, some of the things that make me happy, some of the things that are pleasurable to me in order to be able to be functional for everybody else. Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that's
Yeah.
an important fact to tell people too.
As a physician, I took care of a lot of caretakers, and so the one person they wouldn't take care of themselves, and I was like, I kept saying
Hands
to
up.
them, "Yeah, hello." I was like, I
Hello.
would say to them, "Look, for you to be effective caretaker, you have to take care of yourself, and so otherwise you're going to burn out, and then you won't be any good to anybody." I learned this as a doctor, the same thing. As a doctor, you tend to be a caretaker, but I had to be able to function myself, or else I couldn't be a doctor. And so, yeah, so it's and here's the key: it's not being selfish. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of caretakers think they're being selfish. It's like, no, you're not being selfish. You have to take care of yourself so you can take care of others.
What I love about this book is that it ties in, and there's so many direct correlations to everything that's going on in people's lives. So it doesn't matter really what your personal situation is. The book hits a wide swath of people for any given situation you're in, right? And when we're talking about anticipation, right? And you're talking about the anticipation of pleasure. A lot of times, I'm sure you've seen it, we've talked about it, with people who have depression or anxiety or mental health issues and stuff like that, is they don't have what we talk off camera about, is that feeling of hope, right? Or
Yes.
what we talk about in your book is that anticipation of pleasure. They don't see anything good coming down the street, right? Nothing good's coming. It's all
Yeah.
just, and it's the perception, yes, but without these ideas of the happy place, there comes a point where people just reach a level where there is no hope. And that's when things get really bad, right? Like that's,
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's when I see people in that situation. I try to get paid. This is where it's been frustrating to me because I see all these people that are unhappy, and what's going on is they've resigned themselves to this is the way it's going to be. And you're right; their hope is gone, and that they don't think it's ever going to get better. And you're like, that is not a good place to be. That gets people into trouble. But that hope is one of the things we'll talk about later on too. So, but yeah, anticipating pleasure. One of the other answers, one of the other adjectives would you would use or synonyms would be that it's hope, right? Like you hope things are going to get better.
yes. And you have that desire. I mean, every night, I'll be honest with you, every night I go to sleep, I say my prayers and I pray to wake up tomorrow and a good day tomorrow and everything to flow normally. Now, does that always happen? No. I mean, there's like, you could have the best intentions. And then midway through the day, something happens and you're like, wait, what? Now what is happening? And it's still in my mind, because you and I have talked about it for myself. It's still having that feeling of hope that I know things, whatever the situation is, it's still going to get better, or that I am capable of changing a situation in any which way to make it the way I need it to be. Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
trying to
well,
say?
yeah,
Even though,
well, they call that a growth mindset, where you say, I might be having a setback now, but I have the skills and control to get past the setback and you can continue on the path that I want to go on.
and I think a lot of those things comes in, and we're going to move to gratitude in just a second, but I think a lot of those things come in with what you talk about all the time. And you were just recently on the local news and you were talking about this. I saw you about lumping things on top of yourself. So if you just keep putting, can I use my example? So I have some health issues that I'm dealing with, which are going to resolve themselves. And I'm feeling 1,000 times better already, right? Had a car accident Friday night. Not my
Yeah,
own fault. Someone rear-ended me. Have a
yeah,
lot of things going on. I'm a caregiver. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. There's a lot of things going on in my personal world right now that are a little kind of crazy. But guess what? I'm taking them one at a time. One thing's over here, one thing's over there. And when I need to take that down and deal with it, I'll deal with it. I'm making my lists. I'm starting my day off with what's inside of this book, giving myself points again for looking this good after a car accident and not feeling good. So that's 75 right there. But just being, what we're going to move into is gratitude in a second, but being grateful that I'm alive. I wasn't killed in a car accident.
Absolutely.
Being happy that I still have opportunity today to sit here and talk to you or do other things, which brings us
That's a
to,
perfect example of perception. Like some
yeah.
people could come out of a car accident and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe I was in a car accident. This is horrible. My life sucks." Somebody else could come out and say, "Wow, I'm still alive. Yay."
And I would like you, and I'll be okay with it if we do it this way, because you've known me for 25, 28, 3,700,000 years,
No, more
a
like
long
30
time,
years.
almost 30 years, right? And you and I can both agree that there was a time that I didn't have that mindset, or I didn't feel like everything was going to be okay. I didn't know how to get myself out of it. And through your help and prayer and meditation and changing my diet and all sorts of things, and then just sticking on it and being about it every day. It's intentional. It's an intentional thing every day to be happy. It's intentional to find your happy place. It's not just going to, look, it's in the book, but it's not like it's just going to whack, it's coming to you automatically. It's not like you're going to walk outside and there's your happy place. You have to be intentional, folks, to find it every day amongst a world that's not necessarily designed for you to succeed and find that happy place, right?
So I agree, but here's the problem that people get into. So this is what I found when I would talk to my patients. Say, so I'd say, I'm writing this book on how to have less stress, and they're like, "That's great. I really need that book." I'm like, "Okay." I said, "But let me ask you this question: if you didn't have so much stress, where would you be?" And they're like, "I don't know. I never got that far. All I ever thought about was having less stress." So if you don't know where your happy place is, then you can't be intentional, right? That's a great point. Like you can't be intentional unless you know what it is you're trying to get to. So that's
Yes.
why when we define what a happy place is, there will be
Mhm.
variations. You're a beach in Costa Rica, I I'm retired sitting in front of the water, right, fishing or whatever. Like we all have our different ideas of what a happy place looks like, but the ingredients are all the same.
Most definitely. So let's talk about gratitude, because I think that so many times, and again, I go back to Friday night when I was sitting on the side of the road and then had to get in a paramedic unit to get checked out.
Yeah.
I was so grateful that I was able to get into it and come out, because I've seen so many accidents that people don't, or hear stories of people that don't, right? I'm grateful that I'm sitting here today. And so gratitude for everything, whether it's a roof on your head, food on your table, whether it's being able to go buy groceries or having a vehicle to drive or gloves in the winter. I mean, like toothpaste.
Oh, exactly. Yes. Like, well, so yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
sometimes what happens is a lot of times people don't feel that gratitude until some disaster occurs. They're in a car accident, and all of a sudden now they go, "Oh, I really like being able to walk." Right? It's cool,
Yeah.
right? In the movie Castaway, Tom Hanks plays a character where he gets marooned on an island by himself, and when he figures out how to make fire, he is jumping up and down, screaming, yelling, smiling, laughing because he figured out how to make a fire. And I'm like, well, okay, I just light a match and there's a fire, right? It's but we forget that how amazing that is that I can just take a match and there's a fire.
Mhm.
Or
Oh,
like what you just said, like you wake up in the morning, you're still alive. Yay, 10 points.
this is something else you and I have talked about, but for me, it's prayer, right? So my prayers every night include, and during the day, like I thank God for a roof over my head, food on my table, the fact that I am alive, for breath in my lungs. I actually say that out loud every day. And I always, for the things seen and unseen, what will happen and what won't happen. You know what I'm saying? I'm grateful for those kind of things.
Yeah,
And
no, that's perfect.
it is a
It changes
thing.
your life. It changes your perceptions. So one of the reasons you came out of that car accident saying, "Hey, thank God I'm alive and I'm able to get into the ambulance," is because of that idea of gratitude.
And I can give you, I told you this, and I'll say one more thing about this, not to keep drawing on that because that's done. But when I got in there and they were taking my pressure, I told you this. They said my husband's pressure was highly elevated that night in the ambulance, and he hurt his back really bad. And when they took mine, they came to me, and the guy said, "I said, what is it?" Because I thought it was going to be like through the roof.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was praying and just giving thanks that the kids were in the back seat, everybody's okay. That's it. I don't care about the car. I don't care about anything else. And I was just praying and then doing some breathing like we talk about all the time. And the guy said, "Your pressure is perfect. Your
Wow.
heart rate is perfect. What are you doing? Weren't you driving?" And I said, "Yes, I was." I said, "But I've had years of experience. I have good friends around me and all these techniques and these training things to be able to calm myself down in a situation so I can think rationally because other people were hurt and I need to make sure they're getting care.
Yeah.
And to calm myself down so that I don't have a heart attack on top of an accident. You know what I'm saying? So my pressure has
Yeah.
been at a moderate.
I'm always impressed. I had a patient once. They had a car accident in front of my doctor's office, and they
Mhm.
brought this lady into the office because I was right there and I had an X-ray machine. This was like a young lady. She's in her 20s. Her blood pressure is 240 over
Mhm.
120. I mean, that was like
Mhm.
stroke level high. But
Mhm.
like 15 minutes later, after she'd come down, it was like 110 over 60. And it was like amazing the amount of blood pressure variations it can have depending on your mood and your emotions, right?
Yes, yes. So let's delve in a little bit more to gratitude. You tell the folks what your definition of it is and how they can achieve that feeling of gratitude all the time.
Well, so what I talk about, gratitude is just being thankful. And I think you've already addressed a lot of it. So being thankful for everything. So people tend to either minimize or ignore these really amazing things. This is my wife. We used to run a recovery residence, and she would talk to the patients and say, "You need to be grateful." And they're like, "Grateful for what? My life sucks, blah blah blah." And she looked at him and she would go, "Do you have indoor plumbing?" And they're like, "Yeah." And like, what would life be like without indoor plumbing? They're like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. We need to be
Yes.
grateful." And it's
And
like, yeah, these like things that we just take for granted. And it's like that word take for granted should be stricken from your vocabulary. There is nothing that should be taken for granted.
I think that we do here in this country, right? If you look what's going on in Haiti, if you see what's going on in the Palestinian regions, if you see
Yeah,
what's happened in Israel, if you see what's happening in the Ukraine, I'm using big, things
yeah,
in the news right now.
yeah.
If you see all the discourse on college campuses, you I have a level of gratitude because one, I'm not involved in that directly.
Mhm.
Two, I don't have to worry, especially in war times, that like the Blue Angels are getting ready to fly here in a couple of weeks, and you know how noisy they are just for an hour and a
Yeah,
half, right? Imagine you hear that all day.
yeah.
Imagine your kids are hearing that, and what that does. So
Imagine that's going to drop a bomb on you. Yeah, that would
exactly.
not be
So
good.
what I'm saying is I just try to be grateful for where I am, and another thing that I always say is that I'm present. I've stopped going backwards and behind me. I mean,
Mhm.
unless I need to relay a story like we just talked about a second ago, but I'm not looking back. There's a quote in the Bible about Lot's wife. You can't look back. You turn to
Yeah,
salt. You
yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want that. Like I'm looking forward and I'm grateful. And then I'm grateful for the things that are about to come.
Hmm.
I'm
That's
thinking
the
about that.
anticipation, right? I'm liking that line I just said. Sometimes I just say things and they're like, that line taken for granted should be stricken from your vocabulary. We need to write that down. That was good.
I'm writing it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So let's talk about fulfillment. What does that mean? It's not just Amazon, right? That fulfills your packages. It's Amazon fulfillment. I get those emails like 16,000 times a week.
Yeah. So it turns out fulfillment is actually made up of three things. So the first one is learning. So humans are amazing at learning. Like our ability to learn is so off the charts. It's crazy to think about compared to other animals. So I always wanted my kids when they were in like middle school, when they had to do their science fair project, they say,
Mm-hmm.
here's the project that I want you to do. I want you to teach a guinea pig to sit and see how
Mm-hmm.
long it takes. And I don't want you to teach a dog to sit and see how long it takes. And then I want you to take a 2-year-old human, an infant, right? A little kid, and see how long it takes to teach them. The guinea pig, I'm not sure you could, they never would do it, but whatever. But guinea pig probably would never learn it, maybe, but I doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
Dog, a couple days it would take to teach them how to do it on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
A 2-year-old, it would take 5 seconds. You would say sit, and they would sit. 5 seconds. And you're like, what? That's incredible. And I think because humans are mobile, we have to learn our environment. So curiosity is actually one of those things. It's like hunger. You have to eat to stay alive. I think you have to be curious to stay alive because you need to be evaluating your environment because your environment's always going to be changing around you. So I think curiosity is built into our system and it gives us all these pleasurable sensations. So part of fulfillment is learning. And I found as a doctor, this is one of the greatest parts about being a doctor. It's like you're literally always learning. That's one of the reasons being a doctor is such a nice job because you're always learning. There's always
Mm-hmm.
new stuff coming out. And I will say that this whole project of the book writing, helping people with their stress, gave me 25 years of saying, hey, I got to read that book. Hey, I got to do this lecture. I got to go to this conference. And it gave me a reason to go out and learn more stuff, which then made me a better doctor. So learning is a critical part of feeling fulfilled.
Okay. And I mean, we can, to the point of where you're talking about children
Yeah.
learning. You have grandchildren. You ever seen them with a phone or an iPad?
Yes.
My granddaughter can do things that I can't figure
Yes.
out on an iPad, like that. And
Yes.
she's like, "Let me show you, Gaga," and just takes it over. I'm like, "Wow, okay,
Well,
all right,
here's what I will say though. Sometimes things are changing so rapidly that it gets a little overwhelming because,
yes,
like, when I was a kid, we had records, and it's like records were around for 20 years, and then it turned into 8 tracks, and then it turned into cassettes, and then it turned into CDs, and like the length of time that each one of those lasted, like 8 tracks lasted maybe a year, cassettes
uh-huh.
lasted a couple years, CDs have lasted 3 or 4 years, and it's like it's getting compressed. So we're faced with learning a lot of new stuff. Computers
Yes,
is an example, right? So sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, but the idea of learning is critical. And it happens for old people too. Old people learn stuff. Like I'm old, I'm learning stuff. It's like it turns out when they do studies that older people learn just as well as younger people do. They just don't do it as much.
and the part about that being older and doing it is actually it keeps your mind active. It keeps you from certain health-related issues, and it gives you something again, some sort of pleasure and contentment and something to look forward to. Honestly, keeps you active. My grandma
Well,
used
some
to say, "When
people
you
talk,
stop moving, you stop moving," and that's the truth, you know.
yeah. So people talk about your brain being like a muscle, and it's like you have to exercise your muscles to keep them uh, effective. And your brain's the same way. Think of it as a muscle. Like you have to do weightlifting to keep your muscles up. You have to do brain things to keep your brain going.
Yes. All right, let's talk about the second part of fulfillment. You said there's three things. The first is learning. What's the second one?
So the second one is giving, and so giving is another thing that I think was built into us as humans. We're used to grow being in small groups, 50 to 100 people. Within that group, our survival depended on working together, that
Mm-hmm.
cooperative effort. And so giving is just part of that cooperative effort. So I think that like learning and giving, they were built into our systems to be pleasurable things because that was our key to survival. And so
Mm-hmm.
by giving to others around me, particularly more to the people who I love, and I mean, but in those days, if there was only 100 people, you were obviously intimately involved with every single of the other 99 people in the group. Now we live in societies where there's a million people in our area, and it's changed how we look at it. But the idea of giving is still the same. And I think I just finished reading this book on the different religions, and they all have the same concept of giving to others actually makes you feel better.
Yes. Have you ever seen those studies that they do on, like, I think they call them the blue zones in the world, where
Yes.
people live in small communities? Say there's a group of Italian folks that live in a certain area and they all still cook and have communal meals together. They all still, one person or like five people bake the bread and they share it. They sit outside and they talk. They eat things that maybe me teaches health and nutrition would be like, wow, how are you eating all that pasta and you're not overweight, all these different things. But because they do all of these things together, they have
Yes.
less diabetes, less heart problems, they have less anxiety and mental health issues. they they're just in a much better place, you know.
There was a famous study that I read, and it took 3 neighborhoods that were in Pennsylvania, if I think of it right. And
Mhm.
two of the neighborhoods had a pretty high rate of heart attack, and the third area had this incredibly low rate of heart attack.
Mhm.
And they were like, they're all in the same area, so what's going on? And when they looked at it, it was just that what you just said. That third community was very tight knit. Everybody worked together, and that communal activity lowered their heart attack rate. It was impressive skill
I think
study.
if we look back, like during the pandemic too, and when you and I have talked about this a million times, we're meant to be in front of people, we're meant to be talking, we're meant to be sharing things, giving things like you're talking about, but just we need that human interaction, right? And when everything shut down, that's
Yeah,
what caused the problem for so many people because then you feel so disconnected. Like, what do I do? Because then you lose your sense of self. Like, I know what I do. I teach and I go and I teach cooking and things like that. And how am I connecting? I'm not. And it was a very hard lesson to learn. Do you know what I'm saying? To come
no,
out of it.
exactly. That was because I did a lot of nursing home work, and what I saw was we were so busy protecting their physical health that we were overriding the needs of their mental health, and
Same
that
with the
caused problems.
students. Same
Yeah,
with kids and the students. You know what
caused
I mean?
lots
It's
of
been a
problems.
hard road to get back to that, to find that normal and to get back onto that again, you know?
Yeah.
So, all
And
right,
then
what's
the
the third
third
thing?
part is feeling a purpose in life, and
Yes.
so I've read a number of books now on how to find your purpose. It's interesting because if you were just a human living out in the woods, your purpose would be to stay alive and find food and find water and find other humans to interact with. But
Mm-hmm.
because that is so easy and we take it for granted, that doesn't become our purpose anymore. So now we have to come up with a more intellectual purpose. That's way more difficult than just staying alive, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that becomes a more difficult thing, but it becomes critical because that's your path, that's your goal, that's where you want to be. And if you don't know where it is you want to be, then it's really hard to make decisions. So I take myself back to when I was going to college and I wanted to be a doctor. So if my goal and my path and my purpose is to be a doctor, then I would take classes that help me be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could take classes that didn't hurt me from being a doctor, right? But if you're going to college and you're like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. And then someone says, well, do you want to take an anatomy course? You're like, I don't know. What? I don't know. Do you want to take an accounting course? I don't know. How about a political science course? You don't know because you don't have that goal, that path, that purpose. So it makes it hard to make decisions.
Yes.
So finding your purpose becomes a very important part of being in your happy place because when you know where it is you want to be, then life's decisions are, it's not that they're easy, but they're easier to make because now you at least know where you're trying to get to.
And my best advice for that is that you follow your heart, you follow your passion, because we have so many people who, like examples, like kids whose parents were doctors or lawyers. No offense to doctors or lawyers, right? And they want their kids to follow that, but their kid wants to be a rock and roller or wants to be a hairdresser or wants to, be a clown in the circus, what they're passionate about. You know what I'm saying? And parents lose their minds. I think that at the age that you and I are both at, following that passion and living out what really, I'm a firm believer that when you're born, you get all these gifts inside of you and all these things that you can do to help and impact the world in a positive place, right? And if you're not getting to those and you think back in your life, you think, man, I wasn't happy because you're not using those skills that were given to you to use. That's how I look at it, right? And
Well,
then,
true. But what I find is a lot of people, particularly when you're younger, you don't know what your skills are.
yeah,
And you haven't lived life long enough to know what you're good at or what you're not good at. And so finding your purpose isn't always so easy. And again, because just be staying alive isn't enough of a purpose anymore. Like
let,
unless you're on a Survivor show where you're like surviving now becomes, oh yeah, this is really important,
mhm,
right? So that takes some exploration to try and figure it out, but it also takes some trial and error. So I read this book, and what it talked about is don't be afraid to change what you're doing. Like if you're in one place and you're trying to say you want to be a doctor, and after a couple of years, like, no, this isn't making me happy. I'm going to switch and become a lawyer. And
mhm.
you're like, oh, but I can't switch because then I'll be behind. No, what this guy talked about was within 2 years, you're up to where everybody else is. So don't be afraid to change if where you're at isn't giving you that passion, isn't that giving you positive feedback. Don't be afraid to change because within a couple of years, you'll be up to where 90% of people in that field are.
I think that's fascinating too. And I'm going to give you two examples real quick. Like I'll use my husband as an example. Okay. He's a Jamaican chef. He does his own hot sauces and jerk chicken, and he's amazing, right? When I met him, he sold cars and
Yeah,
he was a salesperson. Okay.
right. I
For the
remember.
longest time, he wasn't cooking or doing. Now that he's doing his own thing, working on his cookbook, bottling his sauces, doing things, he'll tell these stories about how when he was young, he used to go into the kitchen with his mom and she would teach him how to make salad dressings, or he would cook for his friends back in Jamaica. So what he loved was in there. Do you know what I'm trying to say? He
Yeah,
just never explored that as a purpose. He just thought that was survival to eat. You know what I'm saying?
exactly. Yeah. No,
Same with me. You know what I mean? Same
yeah.
with me. I have stories of that. And so I think that we have those things in us. We just don't recognize them when we're younger. And then and a lot of times it comes out of survival, like you're talking about how to pay the bills. What's going to pay the bills? How are we going
Well,
to
that's a
take?
part of it, right? I mean, that you always see this with struggling artists. It's like,
Mhm.
do I keep doing what I'm passionate about, even if it's not paying the bills, or do I have to go find a job that's paying the bills? Well,
Yeah.
life intercedes there.
So I know in the book you have an acronym, the CASH, right? CASH, the
Yeah,
word CASH. Let's
yeah.
talk about that for a second. Let's talk about what that stands for, so we can tell people, since we're working
Well,
on
it's
all of
interesting.
these.
I came up with that term when I was talking about patients with addictions because I found that they needed this. But literally, just in the last week, I was like, you know what? That needs to be a part of everybody's happy place because that's just as important as all the other things we just talked about. So cash is actually an acronym that stands for four things. So the C stands for connected. And I think we've already been talking about that. We need to feel connected to other humans. It's part of what's kept us alive as an organism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't feel connected, you feel, this is why shunning is such a big deal. Like if you go to a community and somebody shuns you, oh yeah, that is like one of the worst things you can do to a human is shun them, because then they've lost their connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Second is that you feel accepted. And we're seeing this in that our world has been changing over the last couple hundred years in our country, where it's like more and more our tolerance has increased, and so what's being considered accepted has extended. And what we're seeing now is this pushback that, we've been expanding what we consider okay,
Mm-hmm.
and now there's a bunch of people in our country who are thinking that we've gone too far, and like we shouldn't be accepting all these people. And I don't agree with that. I think, as long as you're a human, you should get accepted. And it's like, but that's what you're seeing is there's this push pull between, hey, we need to accept everybody, to like, no, we don't. And so that's what you're seeing in our society is the struggle of who can be accepted and who can't be.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing then is feeling safe. And this is the other thing that struck me with that book about all the world's religions. Like literally every religion out there they don't say the word safe, but that's what they're saying. That we want to feel safe. And so if you have God in your life, then you feel safe. Like it's like, or if you've gotten enlightened, or if you, whatever religion you are, when they're all trying to get you to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And safety is just, I think safety, like people talk about that money's being the root of all evil. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that's true. I think not feeling safe is the root of all evil, because what money's doing is trying to buy you safety. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, so when you're trying to feel safe, how much money do you need to feel safe? I don't know. Right. That's a variable number and it can go away any minute. So then you don't feel safe. So I think if we could increase people's feeling of safety, that would eliminate a whole bunch of problems in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece is hope. And we've talked about that already. And hope is this critical thing. It's like anticipating pleasure. Anticipating pleasure implies that it's coming. You just have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Hope is, I'm not sure it's coming, but I hope it's going to come. I'm, I, I'm doing the things that I can do, but it might not come. I just have to hope that it's going to come. And
Mm-hmm.
hope becomes critical for humans because we have future. So we don't have to just live, hey, today is the day and I just have to get through today. No, we can go, hey, tomorrow will be a better day. The sun will come up tomorrow, right? It's like we can look into the future. But if you're looking into the future and you're depressed and you're seeing nothing good happening, well, that's not a good place to be. You want to be able to go, oh, no, I'm looking into the future and better things are on the horizon.
Fascinatingly, when we talk about like people who you said depressed, people who are depressed and stuff like that, right? A lot of times people tend to withdraw, so they're not connected.
That's
Yes?
correct.
They
Yes.
don't feel like anybody's going to accept what they're saying because it feels like it's just so out of whack. Like, how could anybody think that will be okay? Obviously, they don't feel safe. Do you know what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
they're putting themselves in an unsafe head. You're not in a safe headspace, and then that lack of hope. I saw somebody online yesterday was talking when I was waiting at the doctor's office, and I was just scrolling through things, and this gentleman said, what if you changed your entire mindset and you woke up today and you had 3,000 problems, but you were like, everything is fine. Everything is fine. Nothing is wrong. And you just started thinking to yourself that the things that were wrong were like crazy. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, that's the crazy thought. Like, I'm fine. I'm healthy. I'm here. I'm breathing. And you start taking those steps. And he was going into each thing, like you go into all these points about how to switch the perception in your head so you can feel like what you're talking about, connected, accepted, safe, and hopeful. And I think, and I don't know if this goes against the grain of, mental health care professionals, but I honestly think you as a doctor, medications that are given for mental health issues, they can only go so far until you make that decision yourself, like, hey, I've had enough of this. Like, I have to not feel like this anymore. I have to get up. I have to do something different. I have to have something better. And that's when the change starts to come, right? Because it's just like with dieting and trying to lose weight. I can tell you how to lose weight with food, right?
Yeah.
You can tell people how to do things where they have health related issues while they're trying to lose weight with medications. Yes. But if I'm not getting up and I'm not going out to exercise and I'm not doing the other things that accompany all of that, then you hit a point where you're at a plateau and then you just kind of stop. Right.
Yeah.
And until I
Yeah, well,
decide.
yeah, I try to get people not to resign themselves to this. Like there
Mhm.
is hope. Like I've had patients where they literally came to me with no cash, and I'm like, no, you are connected. You got lots of people in your life, and
Mhm.
you whatever you've done is not that bad that people can't accept you for who you are, right?
Mhm.
And I want you to feel safe. And most important, I think this is almost the most important thing is having hope. Because if you have hope that things are going to get better, well, then you're willing to deal with a lot of pain and a lot of trauma if you think things are going to get better.
Mhm. It's an amazing thing, and you see like I work with a lot of children from the communities around here where I live, and a lot of the children have specific issues that go on within their communities that are not so savory for anybody. I'm very grateful,
Yeah.
that I'm able to be able to help, but at the same time, you see leaders rise up out of these communities and make a difference. You see people who have had nothing or had addiction in the family or crime or drugs and different things, or just so severely impoverished that you would never understand, and still they rise up out of this and something magnificent comes. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's that
Absolutely. It's
determination.
all over the place. I mean, this
And
is the
this
whole
is
civil rights movement was like that, right?
and that's what we talk about when I work with the kids. I talk to them about it, of seeing themselves in a different mindset, like all the things that I've learned from you I impart upon the younger generation. And then an important part is also to reach back and pull someone else out of that, to reach back and help as many people as you can with what you've learned and what helped you, right? So that's what you're doing with your book
Yes.
as a doctor. But for people who are boots on the ground every day working to try to make themselves feel better, once you learn these skills, then you can impart them on your own children and grandchildren, people that you work with, people that you see in the community, kids that are underserved and need help. You can make a difference that way, which also, again, goes back to your point of giving and how good it feels to give and to help. It helps your self esteem, but it
Yeah,
also helps somebody else.
absolutely. And it, I think humans need to feel a sense of control. And it's like
Mhm.
when you say, "Hey, I'm going to do my little part, and that's going to change the world." Yeah, it's like you change the world one life at a time, and you start with yourself. Yeah. So
So,
it's
have we?
like looking at the happy place. I call it my happy place castle, and it's
Mhm.
like there's a picture that I have of this, the castle with turrets and
Mhm.
balconies, and there's people that are all excited, and there's flags flying, and it's like there's a moat around it that keeps you safe. And then there's a bridge that people can come over and say hi. And you walk in, and there's all these great smells of the food that's cooking, and your friends are
Mhm.
all there, and your family's all there. And it's like, yeah, but it's filled with pleasure, and it's filled with contentment, and it's filled with anticipation, and it's filled with gratitude and fulfillment and cash, right?
Mhm.
It's like, what a nice place that would be. And
Yes.
that's a place we can all get to. We all have it within ourselves. We just have to know what it is. And now that we've gone through this and figured out what it is, now we can get there.
A couple of things, because I think we have a few more minutes, right? A couple of the other things that I want to say about it is that it's who you're keeping company with and who you surround yourself with for your mindset, right? And
Right?
what voices you have in your head. Yeah.
Yes.
I always say you have to feed a healthy mind, and so you have to eat healthy. It's the music that's going into your head. It's what you're reading. It's what you're watching on TV. You know what I'm saying? All the things that you're filling yourself up with good things. You know what I'm saying? And then connecting. I know this sounds crazy because I sound like I'm crazy, but connecting to the earth, going outside, seeing the trees, listening to the birds. The best thing I have done so far today, besides this, of course, is at 4:15 this morning. I woke up for whatever reason, and I could hear the birds chirping to one another. And it was just amazing, just laying there listening to the birds. And it was so settling to me. You know what I'm saying? Like just so comforting.
No, this is one of the things we take for granted. We're just a part of this earth, right? Or we're a part of this. I mean, maybe we put in charge or whatever, but we're still a part of this whole network we call Earth, right? And
And
it's like
only
we're
here,
just one
only
of the pieces of it.
and only here for a short time. It seems like we have a long time. I'm sure when you sit back and you think about all the things you've done, you think, man, I thought I had like another 50, 60, 70 years. You know what I'm saying? And then you realize I don't. I try not to harp on that. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's important to live your passion, live your dream, connect to people, and love yourself. It's the hardest thing we do. I swear to you, to love yourself is the hardest thing because I say it to you every time we're on here. I can tell myself 6,000 different ways that I'm wrong. I'm not doing the right thing.
Mhm.
I'm not good enough. I can do it all day if I need to. I don't do it anymore, but I have.
That's good. So you've
And if
watched the episodes on self-esteem. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good
but
stuff.
but I'm saying if you looked at me now, you wouldn't know that, right?
Yeah,
You wouldn't you think I have it all together. And there are times during the day you doubt yourself like anybody does. I'm sure you do too, even though, you're some super doctor author person.
that's
But
right.
at the same time, it's that constant reminder that it's intentional, step by step. Rome was not built in a day. So it's not like you're going to have it all today. Because even like you said, even if I won the lottery and won, that $1 billion that was up for grabs a couple weeks ago, um, I'm still not to a point where I know exactly what my ultimate happy place is at 57 years old. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm working toward it. I know what would make me happier,
Yeah.
but I'm still gathering information and making my plan on what I want to do as I get older. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
it's important to just step by step to get there, and taking those steps to feel better each day is critical.
For the book, yeah, Happy Place. It's a roadmap to your less stress. And I want you to get on our podcast and like it and subscribe. And then if you want, on our website, it's called the Less Stress Doc. And I have an online course that's going to be coming out soon. So good for that, right? So, and my audiobook, I just finished reading up the audiobook. So that'll be available soon too.
My book, I haven't told you yet, but my children's stories, they're about food, nutrition, and stuff, but with a fun character called Isabella Pearl Food Adventure, have moved into the illustration process. So by October, I will be, like yourself, a published author for children's stories and ready to do that whole scene. So I'm excited for that. So I thank you and for all of the input and all of the great information that you've disseminated to me over the years. And hopefully everything we're saying here helps a lot of people. Definitely go out and get a copy of Highway to Your Happy Place.
Here's my sign out. I want everybody living in their happy place.